So we have a great panel of people to think about sort of how to translate some of those aspirations that we just heard in the report from the city and from Oliver Wyman, but also just to think about how we are going to make the city all the things that we want it to be in this reimagination of normality, as I thought was a very nice way to put it. So to talk about this, we have Melanie Eusebe, who's an entrepreneur, an author, and probably best known for founding the Black Business Awards. Sharon Coutu, an entrepreneur, now working with a lot of different businesses, angel investor and philanthropist. Danny Lopez, who's had a very varied career, sometime in public service, but primarily in business, and now CEO of Glasswall. And John Romeo, who's obviously Oliver Wyman and been involved in that report as a managing partner. And Sharon, I'm afraid she's joining on the phone, but Sharon Ament, who's director of Museum of London. So thank you to all of you. We don't have a huge amount of time. Listening to that, the sort of three big moves that we're thinking about for the city in that report: a world-class business ecosystem, vibrant offer, and an outstanding environment. I mean, Melanie, when you think about where the city could go, where you would like it to go, what's part of the vision for you?
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here and to allow ourselves to dream and reimagine. And so when I think about the painful events of last year for several of us, I think that the innovation and the inclusivity of the city is, quite frankly, is what is going to pull us through. Even though we were shutting down businesses and we were locking down in our homes, quite frankly, I can see right now with London opening up that we couldn't kill the human spirit, and we have an opportunity to reinvest and grow in a different way. With innovation, with the call for innovation, it almost commands that we are inclusive in a new and fresh way. And so I would say that for the organizations that reside in the City of London, then we should think of, number one, how do we ensure that we are fostering the amazing talent that we do have that reside within this country, as well as attract the exceptional talent from around the world with our footprint. But then also we have to look at how do we invest in businesses, in small businesses, and support them in a new and fresh way. During COVID, we saw truly that SMEs were the engine that run our economy, and so many of them have been impacted and are they're finding it hard to find their feet again. And so two different tranches of investment and two different tranches of attention really do need to be had. One, our organizations and how do we foster inclusive talent, but then also how do we foster SME growth across all of the industries, from hospitality to arts and media and fintech.
Well, thank you. We've already got some questions on that theme, but I'm going to let everyone else have a quick say. So, Sherry, what does it mean for you, and what's most important?
I absolutely agree with the others. I think that talent is the most important thing for all of us, and making it good. Upskilling people who currently work in our companies is really important, and then thinking about how we bring on the next generation and others into our strategic industries. And doing that flexibly, so that if you are taking care of children, you can still have a vibrant career in the city. And if you're at university, maybe you want a part-time role so that you can study and learn those other important employability skills at the same time. So I think I would focus on skills and talent as the most important, and make ourselves and our companies as flexible as possible. And observe best practice in around the UK and around the world, so that it's as easy here for people to work with us as anywhere in the world, or not even as easy, more easy here than anywhere else in the world.
So Danny Lopez, I mean, we've had Melanie has highlighted. In fact, we've both the speakers have highlighted not skills and inclusion, as well as that crucial point of sort of nurturing SMEs and business generally. What are the missing pieces for you, or what do we need to kind of redouble our efforts on?
I think definitely the spirit of togetherness, regardless of what vertical you're in, is key. I mean, we talk a lot about access to networks. We've spoken about talent, capital, ideas, thinking. I think if you look back at the last year, we can be very proud of how well we've responded and the resilience that we've shown. But we have been in survival mode, and I've never really bought this argument that the race to digital means that you can just turn the model on its head and kind of look back on that energy and the vibrancy and the buzz that Lord Mayor was talking about earlier. We need to get that back into our lives. I think it's part of our DNA. It's part of how we behave as human beings. There was a wonderful line in that video that said, the more humans you put together, the more ideas that you will have. And I think there's an underlying theme for me, which is that collaboration is the new competition. I think we saw that just before the pandemic. I mean, in fintech in particular, I see that every day. The big guys, the medium-sized guys, the small guys working together. The collaboration part for me is absolutely crucial. And then the second piece to highlight is, what does hybrid mean? I feel like we're talking a lot about hybrid as a way of not really knowing what the new model will be. We just sort of say, well, it's hybrid. And we'll all have different ideas, and what will work for some won't work for others. And Sherry very rightly pointed out how important learning from this process will be. So I think the next few months really will be about drawing out what works best in different circumstances, learning from each other, and bringing all of that together to see exactly what we mean by hybrid. And hybrid will likely mean a lot of flexibility. But again, the network piece, the vibrancy piece, the energy piece, and then I think there's a sense of pride. We all love London, the energy that it gives us, the pride that it generates, and just recovering that and throwing back that into our lives again will be really important.
John Romeo, I mean, this is a conversation, obviously, that's being held around the world, because we've bet on cities, and particularly the kind of cities that the City of London is, for many years. And anyone who has bet on cities has done very well. As an economist, I could see how much agglomeration we've had, how much return we've had from our cities globally. People questioning whether that's the model for the future. Is that something, I mean, I know Oliver Wyman is sort of engaging with that. Are we potentially facing a structural change, but the way, not that there's no role for cities, but that their role is shifting? If so, how does the City of London respond to that?
There's no question the role is shifting, but I certainly don't think it's going away. What we're talking about here is creating an environment that enables firms to thrive, and directly that includes some of the supporting resources that enable entrepreneurs to grow and scale up their businesses. And that evolves, right? It's access to finance, technical assistance, mentorship. And for incumbent firms, it's helping them to learn from each other, to adapt to some of the new challenges Danny was just touching on. But it goes beyond that, right? It's not just a business side. Indirectly, there's also a really important role for culture, for leisure, for the built environment. I mean, London is not just for work. It's got 170 museums, it's got over 850 art galleries, 350 live music venues. It's a place where people want to be and where they want to have fun. And it also needs to be a place where the built infrastructure is competitive and world leading. And that's everything from transport to 5G to buildings that use renewable and green energy. And getting that ecosystem to work is all about getting all of those features together to work in harmony.
And Sharon Ament, I know that, I mean, you just heard about culture. The Museum of London was already facing a pretty interesting few years, and then we've had COVID. How are you thinking about your role as part of this new vision for the city?
Well, we're certainly at the heart of it, and as everybody has been talking about, culture is really there. And what I think we've learned over the past year is, well, we've lived in a kind of messy situation, one that was unexpected. And I think that messiness is going to be taken forward. And I think out of messiness grows great ideas, great opportunities. So I think we've all learned to be a bit more confident with messiness. Certainly the city has, and our organisation, the Museum of London, has as well. So more experimental, more piloting, more room for failure. And museums are really at the heart of this. Museums and culture are at the heart of growing our own talent for London and in London and beyond. And I think that kind of dealing with a whole lifetime of talent, from the first time somebody visits a museum to when they find themselves, setting up their own company in the city itself. And culture is playing a huge part in that recovery, and we can see that our role growing stronger.
Now we have had, and I just want to encourage people listening, we've had some questions, and one sort of gets to the heart of this slightly. It's diversity is an undoubted asset of London, but there's a big gap to inclusion, which is the realization of the potential that diversity offers. How will the corporation promote inclusion? I was struck also by the sort of phrase, a nurturing environment, domestic talent, which is used in the report, making sure that we're not just attracting far-flung talent. I don't know who wants to. Melanie, you were nodding vigorously. Do you want to come back on that?
Oh, I was nodding vigorously because, yes, the question is absolutely right that inclusion is a core part of innovation, the innovation that we need to move forward and sustain impact. But I think that inclusion is different. It's different than having the corporation. No longer is diversity and inclusion the responsibility of the corporations or the organizations. After the events of May 25th last year, and even just with our own launch of Stephen Lawrence Day a few days ago, then quite frankly, all of us as residents and lovers of the City of London have a responsibility for a deeper and bigger form of allyship. And so, yes, there are, of course, programs that support diversity and inclusion, but quite frankly, every single one of us as ambassadors of our city, the responsibility is now infinitely more personal. With COVID and the pandemic, we've become quite insular, haven't we? All of us in our homes. And now we have to almost make City of London our home again and take responsibility for it individually. That being said, of course, large organizations are pressing the pedal down on diversity and inclusion initiatives like never before after what happened last year. However, this is it's not necessarily just about the large organizations. It's also about every single one of us. So that's why I was nodding my head, because I agree. But on the other hand, allyship has definitely changed over the last year. And so I question every single one of us and say, what do we do to make London more inclusive?
Sherry.
Well, I think I'd probably build on that. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I build on that comment and think about a couple of the initiatives that have been launched by and supported by the City of London. So I think about Digital Boost, which is encouraging all of us, all employees of large companies and small companies, to reach out, to have coffees with people, to understand and hold a hand out so we can understand what the vibrant companies are doing and what we're doing at the companies. And there's lots of things to do on that. But it's the small companies, because it's the smaller companies employ 70% of the people, and they're not that well known. So getting them known by, again, just encouraging every single one of our employees, including the new permanent hires, to nurture the new people who are curious about what's going on in the city and our companies is important. And just on universities, also an initiative that was launched in Guildhall is Workfinder, that encourages all employers of the fintech companies to reach out to those in universities and provide part-time work, internships, work experience. This helps them get their first sort of hand onto the rung of the ladder that allows us to see the impact that we can have. And that's especially important for people from diverse backgrounds. 2 weeks ago, we launched the Kickstart program into fintech. And that's with DWP, and that's for young people on universal credit, getting them 6-month placements in the fintech firms. that's a great way of, again, opening up opportunities to people from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, and really critical starting point for them. And I think they've done a lot, but it's around encouraging everybody to be a steward in the community as a part of the community. And I think that's these partnerships between government and civic organizations and the employers, big and small, is really where the key is.
And I mean, John, when you look sort of across and also sort of global lessons, what works here? I mean, those of us who are managers know it is a continual slog to be, and one ends up having the same conversations with people at every single hire, because everybody around the world has the same set of things that they're dealing with and the same trade-offs they're making when they make an individual hire. And to make sure that you're still pushing for diversity on all those decisions it can be exhausting, but it's worth the commitment. If we know that inequality has almost certainly increased as a result of this crisis, that some of these challenges have got harder even as we're talking about them more, what are the models that work?
I mean, I think it's really well documented that diverse teams are smarter and they deliver better outcomes. We see that every day. What's interesting is looking at some of the success factors for firms that have really excelled on this, right? And they target inclusion at all levels of the business. They get their senior people to act as the leaders they should be, including rewarding those different leadership styles and showing there's no one single trait. They also prioritize sponsorship for underrepresented groups. In one study we did in the US on the gender leadership gap, 95% of senior female execs cited the importance of having a sponsor, right? Sponsors help level the playing field in an organization, particularly where there are some less visible barriers to contend with. And then they treat diversity and inclusion like a business. They set tangible goals, they track against the targets, they make sure they're progressing, and they have accountability. And when you take that and you think about it at a London level, openness has always been one of London's greatest strengths. And we need to change that situation where the postcode where you're born dictates your future. And you look at all these cities across the world, they're built on the strength of community. And they're good when everyone is involved and when they're built and designed for everyone. And that, I think, is the opportunity we have now, given the immense challenges and the immense opportunity that's in front of us.
And just to take this, a conversation around inclusion also into a sort of socioeconomic and geographical direction. There's a very interesting question from Charles Randall. How will the corporation combine its place in London with the UK's nation and regions in a world of dispersed and hybrid working? I mean, there have been a lot of people who wondered whether this could, have applauded the fact that London might lose some economic activity as a result of COVID, that there might be more economic activity more evenly spread around the UK. I mean, how does the city respond to that? How does the city become part of that and not just a defensive holding on to its position? Danny?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I actually think that it's an opportunity for everybody. It's an opportunity for London, and it's an opportunity for all of the various centres, commercial centres around the country. And if I just pick on fintech, for example, when I lived in the US for a few years, and friends and colleagues in the US always used to say to me, "Gosh, the UK has this tremendous advantage because here in the US, we've got the money in New York, we've got the regulators in Washington, and we have the innovators on the West Coast," kind of exaggerating for effect a little bit, but that's how many people saw it. Well, we don't have that. For starters, we've got this tremendous ecosystem in London, but guess what? It's amplified. It's so much more powerful when it actually draws in the talent, the innovation, the productivity that you have in fintech centers across the country. And actually, the UK fintech ecosystem is really the result of this really strong collaboration between London and a whole bunch of cities across the country. And I think that is, we talk a lot about the word responsibility, and that is a responsibility that we should all take extremely seriously, but it's a massive opportunity, because when you bring all of that together, the proposition really becomes much stronger and everybody benefits. There's more productivity, talent has more opportunity, and frankly, companies do better. So I think this is a great moment for that bringing togetherness across the country. And the race to digital, to me, actually just sort of amplifies that. It's not a challenge.
Sherry.
I think we're seeing that at Digital Boost at the moment, where we've got thousands of volunteers who work at financial services firms and fintech firms in London, and they're mentoring people all around the country on Zoom calls and Jitsi calls. So they're already sort of upskilling adults all around the country. And we also see that at WorkFinder, where London's businesses are using employees on virtual work experience and virtual internships from all over the country and actually all over the world in order to man and woman up their projects. I think it's, to a certain extent, the pandemic has afforded us to be able to work virtually and to not pay as much attention to the physical barriers. So upskilling someone who works in Birmingham or who works in Bath or Cardiff is really easy, and their team is in London, or most of their team is in London, but they're telecommuting or video commuting from elsewhere. So I think you see examples of really close interconnection between all the communities because of the need for talent, and because of how technology enables us to reach that talent. If we're a fintech in London, it doesn't mean that all of our employees have to be physically in London, but they can still be benefiting from colleagues and from the knowledge of working on an important mission to them. And you can see this in the reporting. We can see the net importers of talent with the companies in London already, and exporting of mentoring coffees and volunteer days. It's fascinating to see the markets being made.
Melanie.
I just wanted to add that in regards to minority businesses across the UK, so contributing 74 billion per year, and quite frankly, the largest businesses are in the north of England. So there is, it would be remiss of me not to mention that gap, that the largest minority businesses are in the north of England, so in Liverpool and in Blackburn and in Leeds. And so there is a gap. And so I see some of the questions that are coming up, and quite frankly, investment in businesses, in SMEs, in those incubator spaces is quite critical, because there are incubator spaces. There is not a competition, but there is a clear talent boost that's happening in some of the other cities of the UK that have resulted in quite large successful businesses being born outside of the city of London. And so to answer the question that's in the chat, yes, incubators are critical, and we do have to create an environment that fosters that talent for SMEs.
And that's, yes, a question from Fiona McKeith, which I was going to put to you, but you've answered it. So, this is important especially for Black and Asian startups within the square mile. I should, Sharon, Ament, we have quite a few questions that sort of relate in part to the art and beauty. But one of the questions that I rather like is, sorry, I've lost it. Yes, where does beauty fit into this wonderful and inspiring roadmap? Last week, Ursula von der Leyen launched the ambitious new European Bauhaus program, which prioritizes sustainability, inclusivity, and beauty as the 3 pillars of recovery. Beauty and the arts and the built environment, where does that fit in?
Well, we all want to live in a world which inspires us, and certainly beauty is part of that. I would also say playfulness as well. And of course, I'm deeply enmeshed in my big project, which is building a new museum of London in Smithfield. That's going to be messy as well as beautiful. kind of gritty in the Smithfield area, kind of a messy edges of the city itself. And I don't think we can get away from anymore that kind of wholeness of our lives. We want to work in places which sustain us emotionally and aesthetically, which connect us to others. We love being amongst other people. We love being amongst people who are different to us. And that's what's so great about London. We meet everybody on the street, or on the buses, or in the cycle lanes, in my case. So, that thinking about the wholeness of our being as humans in our work and our home life. And so that puts beauty right at the centre, and all around us in London are either beautiful kind of serendipitous moments, a purposeful beauty, where I'm looking out of my office now and seeing some great architecture, managing the spaces we have in a way which creates that kind of moment, those moments of beauty and repose. And so I think it's a kind of building in beauty into a city fabric is a purposeful thing. And we're lucky in London because people have been thinking about it and doing it over the millennia.
There is a great question on this. Richard Burge said, I think the corporation is being very forward-looking in planning. A particular opportunity is taking the public realm street space into buildings themselves, public rooftop gardens, but there's more linked to pop-up shops and entertainment and the emergence of innovative SMEs, for example, at 22 Bishopsgate, level 7. Are there more? Could we take this opportunity, especially if it's possible that there'll be fewer bums on seats in some of these offices, at least on any given day? Should we be using the inside of our office spaces more creatively? I don't know who wants to come in on that. Melanie,
I think
Stephanie. I mean, this is something that was right at the heart of the plan and the thinking that the corporation has led, both in terms of it going beyond just London. To the comments earlier, it's not a zero-sum game, and you see the Lord Mayor coordinating with other mayors on trade missions. You see investors, the ecosystems, and now on using the space, it's been a fresh view and reusing some of that unused office space. How do we promote some of the green areas, making the city more sustainable, the biking lanes, the encouraging people, talking about the pedestrianization of certain areas at different times. It's all about building that sense of community and getting both the work and sort of the fun aspects together. That's what's making the city great. And that's where I think the reimagination of this is the greatest opportunity.
Danny.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with John. I just think this is, I keep talking about the word opportunity, but this feels to me like the beginning of a movement, because we haven't faced something like this before. So, we've had the really, really tough 12 months that we've all experienced. We now look forward, and it's sort of this period of actually we're excited. Everything starts feeling way more positive, but we actually don't know how this is going to play out, which is why I really applaud the fact that the City of London Corporation is doing this, not just with 6 months, 12 months in mind, but 5 years, because we are entering a very long-term new chapter that's going to take us quite a while to sort of figure out. So yes, we're reimagining, and I agree with John. For me, it's community and it's creativity, and every idea will be a good idea. And I think Richard's point is absolutely the right one. There'll be so many more of those, and now is the time to really be able to draw into those too. That creativity, that community. We will get it wrong sometimes. We will get it right others, and over time, this will be the beginning of that new chapter. But it starts to me as a movement, because every city around the world will be thinking about these sorts of things. It will really be a global movement, but each individual big city has the chance to reshape that.
Melanie, I think you wanted to come in earlier.
I just wanted to say that if we look at some of our sister large cities across the planet, then as has been said, we are all going through the same challenges. With the growth in, I dare I say it, hybrid working and changes of the ways of working, then we are going to have to look at how we flexibly, how we innovatively use space. The City of London is it's a beautiful space and the history that's embedded, quite frankly, as you walk through the City of London is absolutely incredible. And so now, as I said, we do have an opportunity, I'm going to overuse the word as well, to rethink how we use the space in a more innovative and inclusive way, but also in a way that reflects where we want to go, quite frankly, and who we want to be residing in its hallways and byways. So if we look at Johannesburg after apartheid, a beautiful example of what's been done to multi-use space. If we also look at New York as well, if we look at some cities who have gone through wars as well, so if we look at Tel Aviv, then you'll see that there are ample examples of cities that have reinvigorated, regenerated themselves after periods like this. So it's an opportunity for sure.
Sherry.
Thank you. I think the City of London has an opportunity to lead in this as well. If I think, and on what hybrid is, many of my companies are based outside of London and people have gotten used to working outside of London, but we still need to come together as teams. So, if I think about, if I'm pulling people in from Portsmouth and Bath and Cambridge and Glasgow, I want to come to London, but I don't want a permanent office base there. So going to a place, where we can come together very flexibly, very frequently is great. If it's once a week or if it's once a month, knowing that London would welcome others from other places, so that we can come together, as often as we need to in this new hybrid world, which we're just navigating, I think would be excellent. And when I wrote the Scale Up report on stimulating UK economic growth, one of the criticisms that we had of London and that Scale Ups had of London was that you had to have, it was very hard to get non-permanent place and flexible places. So if the City of London can make these incubators or accelerators or flexible workspaces capable of welcoming people from every part of the world, again, by using, flexible technology, so that if I'm coming in from, Bahrain, I can book a place for my team for a couple of days or a couple of weeks for an offsite. I think that would go a long way to showing how open London is, and facilitating the growth of companies that, for whatever reason, don't have all of their employees coming in all the time, but that need to convene and to bring people together.
We have an interesting challenge from Louise Granger, which could also at least add some interest inside some of these offices. She says, as interpreters of the beauty and history and culture of the city, we've always found it almost impossible to connect with businesses and companies in the square mile. We, and that's the City of London Guide lecturers, are seen as very much for visitors. How can this change? That is quite a challenge about companies and businesses being more open to visits. Obviously, we actually at Bloomberg, we do have, I think, architectural visits because we're so proud of our brand new building. But maybe that could be a piece of it.
I think it's an interesting point. It raises a broader question over who's going to deliver some of these changes, right? Because it's not just leaving this to the corporation. The businesses need to consider themselves ambassadors of this mission and get involved. And it certainly means embodying some of the activities that are suggested. But I think to Louise's question, it means making more explicit external commitments and getting involved in the local community. And there are opportunities on some of the pilots from the London Data Commission. There are maintaining some of those commitments for big, ambitious projects. There's certainly aspects on the return to office. But as we think about the focus now on being, how do you help TfL, real estate, the business owners recast their business models, repurpose the properties, redesign public infrastructure to ensure that despite changes in the commuting and work patterns post-COVID, that London remains that vibrant, thriving center.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, and I just wondered, we've been rightly positive in this panel, But I guess we shouldn't forget that there could be some really important challenges ahead, and there is obviously a risk that a relatively small proportion of the UK will be part of this wonderful vision, because the difficulties and challenges of COVID having intensified the inequalities that were already there. I just wondered, when it comes to getting funding to SMEs and making sure that people are included in our future business plans and our skills and our workforce, what's each of you, if you had one thing that you thought we had to be really focused on, not just in the next year to 18 months, but beyond that, make sure that people that this isn't a vision just for a very few. I don't know who wants. John, maybe.
I focus on the community. We've touched on. I would focus on community. I think if the businesses it's part of this broader push on stakeholder capitalism and recognizing they have a real commitment to those communities. But I wouldn't view it as either or as zero sum. A lot of the biggest employers in London are actually the biggest employers in the UK, and they employ plenty of people outside. How do we facilitate that? How do we continue to support the growth and some of the investments in those other centers? Because as they thrive, London will also thrive. So I would counter the concept that it's a zero-sum game.
Sherry?
I think I would encourage employers, big and small, large and growing as well, to encourage staff to be generous and have that coffee with people, host that insight day, and reach out particularly to SMEs. So if you think about the one stat is, in large companies, we train and we have learning and development. We actually spend quite a lot of money on upskilling in digital our staff. Small companies don't do that as much. So the coffee days and the stopping for an hour to give a helping hand or an encouraging word or point out a great course, somewhere to somebody else who's working in a SME, I think is really important to equal almost an arbitrage of those who have been digitally upskilled with those who haven't yet. I think that it will play an important part. And again, if you get the employers to encourage this and not to penalize someone for being generous by having a coffee with someone or having an insight day for a school or a uni, I think that will go a long way to encouraging all of us to embrace our communities, however we define that, either geographically or based on a demographic or a gender or a socio or a ethnicity background.
Sharon, Ament.
I would encourage commerce to reach out to cultural institutions, to reach deeply into all schools across London. There's about over 1.5 million pupils in schools in London, and that connection with young people is vital, absolutely vital. And through culture, that can be done very effectively to help foster what we call fusion skills. So that's about building the soft talents that really are the hard talents in the end for what businesses need.
John Romeo. Sorry, John, we've already heard. Danny, sorry.
So I think, Stephanie, I think it's right to be positive. I think actually, we all need to remain as positive as we possibly can, because that will definitely help. I think that yes, we have to acknowledge that it will be bumpy. This is not going to be that's why this is a 5-year strategy. I think there'll be ups and there'll be downs, and that's part of it. Things that I would do, champion the successes, because there will be a lot of them. And the more those successes are shared, whether it's at individual level, small business, medium-sized, large, etc., that will foster the spirit that we need. Because John is absolutely right, and Sherry, this is community-led, but the more we have of that, it has this cumulative effect, which will actually impact the whole of the country. And then a couple of things that I would close on. First of all, agreeing with Sharon that this is, yes, about business in so many ways, but that retail, hospitality, and leisure/culture piece is so important. And the more we support that, the more we will create the right environment for this to really take off in the way we want it to. And I will end with the word that we've all used so much, responsibility, because a bit of impact from each individual person and each company will have it'll just go a very, very long way. And that's what it's all about. If we each take responsibility, we will get the outcome that we're all aspiring towards.
Melanie, last words.
My last word for the day, collaboration, and collaboration not with those who look like us or sound like us or are in the same business as us, in the same type of building, but quite frankly, collaboration across different industries, across different typologies of business, large businesses, small businesses. And I think that with the large organizations, particularly, we are, me being a representative of Fenchurch Street, we are house proud, and we should actually look at all of our neighbors and say, hey, how can we work with you? And I mean the small sandwich shop owner on the corner all the way through to the Barbican that is around the corner as well. So I think that we can only go somewhere innovative if we collaborate across the different residents of the City of London, and quite frankly, as ambassadors for the UK as well.